heart, in our soul. So let's realize the presence of God in our midst. Thank you. Thank you. So this is our Christmas celebration, so to speak, without cribs, carols, cards, cakes, right? Only trying to understand what the Christmas event means to us and means in light of what the Bible bears witness to it. Okay. So again, as I said, a very special welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. Now, in my emails to you, I may not have said to everyone because I'm not very well organized here. I mentioned that the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verse 7 will be the focus. And that text says that, Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes and laid in a manger because there was no room in the inn for them. So our focus will be on this very, very simple, familiar reality. There is no room. Okay, and I'm even leaving out in the inn for them all. There is no room. That's our focus. And my thesis is that Christmas is God's response to this universal human reality that there is no room. Each one of us, in our own different ways, circumstances, contexts, have experienced this and felt the sting of it. There is no room. These words speak with particular force to me because of the varied experiences that I've gone through, particularly in my college. And Ilman, of course, knows more about it. And those who have read my memoir titled On a Stormy Course will immediately understand what I'm saying. And Francis is reading it, and I want to thank Francis for it. So, together with this, I also want to sort of flag another verse, verse 34, I think, of the same chapter 2 of Luke's Gospel, which says that a sword, it's a kind of prophecy, a sword will pierce the heart of Mary. A sword will pierce through your heart also. And we would, for the purpose of our discussion today, we would see Mary, the mother of Jesus, as a representative of womanhood. So, in man-made systems, all over the world, in all centuries, in all cultures and places, there is a connection between the woman and the sword. Not that she's a wielder of the sword, which man is, but the heart of women could be pierced by the sword. And I'm sure that my friend George John, being a psychiatrist, will have his own profound interpretations for this. I leave it to him at the time of discussions. Now, this is not the main thrust today. Both are very profound themes, but we won't have time to develop both side by side. Therefore, let me say a few words about Mary's plight at the beginning, and then I'll focus exclusively on there is no room. Now, what Luke is saying, and Luke is the only one who says this, what Luke is saying is that the crucifixion of Jesus Christ cannot be separated from the crucifixion of Mary. Hermann Hesse, the famous author of Siddhartha, raises a question. He says there are 4 categories of sufferers. Which is the most unbearable pain? And he comes to a conclusion that being the mother of the martyr is the greatest, right? So Mary had to undergo this most unbearable experience, described with astonishing and almost startling economy. A sword shall pierce through your heart also. You can write a volume on this, but the Bible does not do it. It just deals with it in 6-7 words. That's the amazing economy of the scriptures, all scriptures. Now, the point I want to make is this, and I'm conscious of saying something controversial. This sword that has to pass through or has to pierce the heart of the Blessed Virgin is the sword of non-conformity, right? The role that this innocent village girl, she could not have been more than 18, 19, maximum 20, is called upon to play in this most incredible history of God's dealings with human beings, is something that makes my marrow melt. If you read it in the context of the Jewish culture 2000 years ago, the status of women in that society, the rigid, brutal moral policing that happened at that time, the strict enforcement of harsh courts, particularly on women, particularly something that Jesus highlights in the story of the woman taken in adultery, recorded in the 8th chapter of John's Gospel, where Jesus says, he who has not committed a sin can cast the first stone. Then he turns to the woman and says, I also do not condemn you. Why? Because condemnation has always been a one-way traffic. It's a woman in every society who has had to bear the brunt of it. Okay? All these echoes are already present in the Christmas event. And why I'm doing this meditation with you is that lamentably, tragically, heartbreakingly, I would say, all the spiritual, symbolic, thematic richness has been cast out of the Christmas event. And it's been turned into a commercial thing. And it's the most incredible or unacceptable degradation of the central event in history, of which we'll see a little more presently. So this non-conformity principle is important. You know why it is important? And that's what I want to emphasize. With that, I'll leave, and I'm going to now actually stray into the field of John George and Joan Anthony. When is it that you become an authentic individual? Have you ever thought of this? When do you become an authentic individual? When you conform, or when you dare to break certain things because your destiny wills it? When do you become a full-fledged human being, sharply defined in your individuality, as Jesus was? As Jesus was. And that was his charismatic power. Why did Jesus attract everyone, including children? There was a power in him. And what was that power? Do you think Jesus was a conformist? He was a revolutionary, radical, non-conformist. But a religion of conformity has been erected in his name. There's only one virtue that is required of Christians today, and that is to conform and to conform and to conform. What's the consequence? The consequence is that the Christian community, I would say Christendom is not producing authentic individuals. And if you ask me, what is the greatest need today? Without a shadow of doubt, without a moment of hesitation, I will tell you, it is the nurturing and the contribution to the world of authentic individuals. No spiritual tradition, which does not do it or which fails in doing it is worth the name. And it is such a spiritual tradition that Jesus refers to as a salt that has lost its saltiness. And says, if it has happened, if the salt has lost its saltiness, what is it good for? He says, it's good for only to be cast out and to be trampled underfoot by men. Such is the gravity of this issue. But as I said, since this is not my central concern, I will proceed. So, this wall of conformity that man-centered religious establishment erects between us and God is something that the Christmas event challenges. I want us to wake up to the fact that the Christmas event is a storm, is a cyclone. It's not the kind of, nice little comfortable carnival thing that we have created out of it. It's a mockery of it. It is a cyclone. It's a spiritual cyclone. But unfortunately, there is no space for these things in the small little framework that we are so comfortable with and which we hold on to as though that's our destiny, which is unfortunate. So I think if you look at the example of Mother Mary, she confronts all of us, and particularly the women of the world, with this challenge to become flamingly individualistic, if you like, fiery. Think of the context. Think of the context. Would a woman today have the courage that Mary exemplified? Then she said, let it happen to me according to your will. She risked everything. She actually took on the entire society. She took on the entire religious edifice, the hierarchy, the authority, everything that was considered important in those days. Okay, I can go on forever with this because I'm excited about this. Let's move on. Now, the next thing I want to say is this. If you look at it historically, and much of my perspective for our discussion today will be historical. My perspective will be historico-spiritual, historical and spiritual, a hybrid of the historical and the spiritual. So I call it historico-spiritual. Okay. So when I read this event through the eyes of history, I come to the inevitable conclusion that the birth of Jesus Christ is a central event. Now, this is most important for me to say so. Please note it down, a central event. Now, what is a central event? A central event is an event that becomes the point of convergence between two contrary directions or two contrary forces, two contrary movements, two contrary pulls. Now, since this is important for us to realize, let me explain what I mean. You look at the Old Testament. If you quote unquote, the history as recorded in the Old Testament, you find a very interesting pattern. The pattern is the pattern of shrinking. The pattern of shrinking. God creates Adam and Eve, and at that point in time, they represent the whole of humanity, of course, in an embryonic fashion. Then what happens? After the fall of humankind happens and human beings get alienated from God, humankind shrinks to the chosen people, right? The Jews become, quote unquote, the chosen people, right? Over a period of time, that also shrinks. And the chosen people now become the faithful remnant. Not everybody in the Jewish race is faithful. Only a small rump. Look at the amazing extent of the shrinkage. So humankind, one race, chosen race called the Jews. Within the Jews, the chosen rump, the chosen the faithful rump, the faithful remnant, a handful of people, and within that, only one man, Jesus Christ. That's how it shrinks. This pattern, though it is diffused over the biblical history of, say, 4,000 years, is very clear. So everything is shrinking. Now, why is everything shrinking? And that is what I want to emphasize. In the logic of biblical spirituality, alienation from God, which in religious language is called sin, is presented as a shrinking principle. Now, this has got various overtones like alienation. Sin is a principle of alienation. What is alienation? If you're alienated, your world shrinks, right? You can be alienated from the whole world. You can be alienated from your own community. You can be alienated in your own home. You can be alienated in your relationship. Most people actually are alienated in interpersonal relationships. There is no aspect of human life which is not penetrated by the principle of alienation. And this is a central issue in spirituality. And this was, of course, a central issue, as George John will tell you, in the psychology of Carl Jung. Now, when Jesus is born, this alienation of the people is at its peak. That's why at the time of the birth of Jesus, the angels say to the shepherds in Bethlehem, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And what is this darkness? Darkness is the darkness of alienation. And darkness is also the principle or medium of shrinking. Now, suppose you're sitting in your room at night. You're doing some work, you're reading, you're writing, or whatever, you're doing something. And suddenly, as it happens often in Trivandrum, the power fails. What happens? Your world has shrunk into yourself. There's nothing you can do. You're disconnected. Okay? That happens. So darkness is always symbolically opposed to light. Light is the expanding principle. As I said in one of the former sessions, light is a continuous outward flow of energy. Darkness is the exact opposite of it. Darkness causes you to withdraw, shrink into yourself. That is darkness. Spiritual darkness is not the absence of light. It is the total shrinking of oneself into oneself, so that there is no space in your personality for anybody else. Your world becomes equal to you, and there is no foothold for anybody else. Me and me and me. There's no space for anybody else in my world. And today it has become the dominant ideology of India. It's called Hindutva. No place for you. No foothold for you. Only me and my people. You're different from me, out you go. Go to Pakistan, go to England. In fact, these days I get many emails saying, you go to England, you're sitting on my territory. Go to England. Right? So this is becoming the most powerful idea in India. When these things happen, at least we must understand it in some perspective. We cannot afford to be spiritually ignorant today. Okay? So these two. Now, if you look at the ministry of Jesus Christ, you find that there's a continuous expansion, right? The ministry of Jesus Christ denotes a continuous expansion. Now, it begins with the Christmas event. Okay? What is the most striking aspect or feature of the Christmas event? It brings people together from all corners. Can you imagine 3 wise men presumably from Persia? They belong to the order of the Persian priesthood, the Magi. There were 2 orders of Magi and all that. Those details are not important for me to mention, but they are just certainly from the Gentile world. The shepherds are Jewish. The Magi are non-Jewish, Gentile. So the Jewish and the Gentile world come together. Okay? And then the shepherds and the wise men apparently meet, and that's a legend. Factually, it may not be correct. If you calculate the chronology, etc., the shepherds and the Magi could not have been at the same time in the manger visiting Jesus. But take it as it is. They come together. I mean, two completely incompatible strata of society. The news reaches the palace of the king, and he is rattled. And in the birth of Jesus, the distant Rome plays a part by ordering a census which compels Mary and Joseph to leave for Bethlehem. All kinds of things crisscross in this event. Okay, so, and from then onwards, what happens? Jesus is going around, gathering people who are scattered, people of all kinds, people who had no place, people who had no room, people who had no room in the inn called Judaism. To them, Jesus opens the door. People who had no room in the inn of hope, to them, Jesus opens the door. People who had no room in the hierarchy, Jesus opens the door to them. And that is why Jesus in chapter 10 of John's Gospel says, I am the door, right? Remember? What does Jesus say? I am the door. Why does Jesus say? You can't understand the meaning of that statement unless you see it in this light. There's no other way. And I struggled with that text for years. I couldn't understand. Only when this understanding dawned on me, did that text open up to my understanding. So Jesus is the door. Now, Jesus says, I am the way. Now, what does it mean for God's sake? To this day, forgive me for saying this, I've not heard a single interpretation of that text, though it is flaunted to every non-Christian, by a Christian. Now, Jesus is the way in the sense that he's exactly the opposite of the way that prevailed then, which was the contracting principle. Okay? Jesus is the way to reach out, to be one with the whole world. Jesus is not the way to create a communal society, for God's sake. Do not insult Jesus. Jesus is a way to embrace everyone. That's what Jesus says, as found in the 28th verse of the 11th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. Come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It's a statement that embraces everyone without exception. Something that I dare say no church can today say. No church can say it, because we've moved away so much, shifted from our foundation. So that is the idea. And that is what the Christmas event is celebrating. Okay, so now we must really, therefore, unpack the meaning of this statement, which actually introduces us to the birth of Jesus. Amazing, isn't it? There is no room for whom? As John says in his Gospel, chapter 1, the first 2-3 verses, he's the creator of the world. For the creator of the world, there is no room. Where? In the inn. Inn is what? Inn symbolizes all the systems man has created, which function necessarily on the transactional principle. Whatever man has created, by the way, examine for yourself, functions on the transactional. Whatever God has created functions on the sacramental. But today we have abolished the distance between the sacramental and the transactional. The sacramental also has become transactional. That's the cleverness of the church. And there's a degradation of the faith. So the idea of there being no room in the inn, now let's understand it now. It refers to the consequence of the orientation of human nature towards sin. And I said at the outset that sin is the shrinking principle. It causes you to shrink. It makes you small. It makes you petty. It makes you shallow. It makes you insecure. It keeps you open to all kinds of worries, apprehensions, fears, irrational fears. Almost all fears are irrational. Why are we prone to these irrational fears, these apprehensions, these prejudices, these insecurities? Isn't it because we are shrunk to a pathetic extent? Fear is a function of alienation. The moment you're alienated from a human being, a friend, for example, you begin to fear him. Now, in India today, security is the ultimate word, isn't it? The greatest concern is national security. But people have no sense to say that this obsession with security is because of collective sinfulness and the alienation that we have embraced as a principle of polity. You create systems of injustice, and of course, you will be consigned to live in fear all the time. You resort to oppression. You use the muscle power. You suppress people's aspirations. You wound people left and right and center to suit your convenience. Why wouldn't you feel insecure? And that's why the Bible says the fullness of love casts out all fear. Power generates fear and more fear, right? Which puts a premium on security. And every time you talk about security, you have to be insecure. The most powerful nation in the world today is the most insecure. I'm referring to the United States of America. The last time I visited the United States, when I decided not to go back to that country, was the time when I was subjected to that special examination, that 4 times, yes, security, security, security. I was virtually undressed and humiliated. And I vowed not to go back to that country ever again. Insecurity. And while this was happening to me in the next cabin, an American lady was sweating and fuming, shouting abuses at the government. So I actually said beneath my breath, take it, because that's the price you pay for your security, your security. Okay. Anyway, now this reality of the human person shrinking is the heart of the matter that needs to be addressed. But let me ask you, is this reality being addressed anywhere? Anywhere? Religion, politics, culture, what have you? We are supposed to be imitators of Jesus Christ, right? And what is the personality of Jesus Christ? It is equal to the cosmos. And we are imitators of Jesus Christ in all our narrow-mindedness, our hard-heartedness, our pettiness, our infantilism. I mean, where have we reached? So it's very important for us to become clear in our understanding of this concept of no room in the inn. Now, for a moment, think of some of the characters in the nativity story. What's the problem with Herod, the king? No room. That's a problem, right? Therefore, what happened? 2,000 innocent boys under the age of 2 were massacred. There is no room in the inn run by Herod. Why did Jesus have to be born outside the religious network? Because there is no room in the inn called religion for such events to happen. Why did Jesus have to be born outside the boundaries of civilized life? After all, being born in a cattle shed and being laid in a manger is not a particularly comfortable and civilized experience, because in the civilized structures of the world, there is no room for you. That's my experience. Take it from me. There is no room unless you dance to the tune of those who are mighty and powerful. There is no room. When I announced my admission policy, giving effect to 50% reservation for Christians and Dalit Christians in particular, Arun Shauri, who was at that time a member of the Vajpayee, he had just retired, lost his position. Arun Shourie was the first person to call for my oust from St. Stephen's College because I endangered the elite interests. The entire media ganged up, the bureaucracy, the government, everyone. I mean, name anyone who matters. You don't have to do anything to become the most hated man in the corridor park. All you have to do is not to dance to somebody's tune. Okay? So there is no room. These things mean a lot to me. When there is no room in our relationships, what happens? Interpersonal relationships become hell on this earth. And this is reflected in the story of the woman of Samaria, found in the 4th chapter of John's Gospel, the conversation between Jesus and the woman of Samaria beside the well of Jacob. Okay, what happened? Jesus says, 5 husbands you have had already. The one who is living with you is not your husband. There's a serious interpersonal problem, dear folks. And it's not confined to Samaria. The whole world is a Samaria in this respect. Do you think there is room in interpersonal relationships? For how many? For who? It's a serious matter. So look at it anyway, any which way you want. Now think of the church in Laodicea. Okay? Book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 20. Where is Jesus kept? Jesus is kept outside the gate. There is no room for Jesus inside the church. And this is held out as an exemplar for the church in Asia. And that's what happens in churches. Okay, so there are instances after instances. Paucity of time doesn't allow me to take all of them. Now, let me mention 3 aspects of this roomlessness as a metaphor. See, very often we read this only as a literal fact and we move on. We don't stop to unpack the symbolic meaning of this statement. No room. The first thing is, my characteristic way of understanding spirituality, and all of my writings reflect it, is that in spirituality, God encounters the human predicament redemptively. So every event, beginning with the birth of Jesus Christ, right up to crucifixion and resurrection, illumines one aspect or another of the human predicament. And so far, I have explained what roomlessness means to the human predicament. And from now onwards, I want to identify, for want of time, just 3 aspects, only 3 aspects of this roomlessness that Jesus would encounter in his life. My point, therefore, is that this notice that appeared on the door of the inn in Bethlehem did not disappear. This notice confronted Jesus all through his public life, his life on the earth.
No.
Okay. Now,
3
aspects of that I'll just mention in the interest of brevity. This can be therefore easily remembered, and then you can reflect on it. The first is, the one thing that Jesus did not find in this world is gratitude. Do you think Jesus found gratitude in this world? Huh? He went about doing good. He helped everyone. What happened to the end? Everyone deserted him. Even his disciples deserted him. Do you think he found gratitude anywhere? He did only tremendous good. He ended up on the cross. That, my dear friends, is a startling revelation of the chronic incapacity of human nature for gratitude. Why do you think people are ungrateful? After all, in the parable of the talents, which we discussed ad nauseum, this theme resurfaces, right? The first 2 servants express their gratitude to the master by using the talents and then handing over to him the whole of it, including talents they earned on their own. What is the principle of this ingratitude? Have you meditated on this? Have you considered this question? In my understanding, ingratitude is a facet of this no room syndrome. No room. There is no room. Now, suppose somebody does a good turn to you. If you have helped people, as I'm sure you have helped many people, all of you, you certainly will agree with me that barring a rare instance here and there, most people you have helped will turn their face away from you and walk away. Is that your experience? It was my experience. I'm not complaining. And in fact, I've had to suffer grievously at the hands of some of the people I helped a great deal. I don't want to go into biographical details. So that's why when, when Mahatma Gandhi was shot, Einstein said, it is a dangerous thing to do good in this world. It's a dangerous thing to do good in this world. Okay? Why do you think it happens? It happens because gratitude keeps the other person in your world. When you're grateful to a person, you carry that person with you, isn't it? Ingratitude holds out the tremendous advantage that you can shake off that person after his usefulness is over. You agree? That's the attractiveness of ingratitude. You're smart. You're not, the old type that remains grateful, right? Why should you carry this burden? You're street smart. Shake off the fellow, move on. Then make use of the next fellow. Shake him off, move on. Ingratitude. One of the most powerful plays I've ever read, taught, is King Lear by Shakespeare. King Lear. It deals with the ingratitude of daughters, two daughters, Goneril and Regan. And there is a scene in which Lear realizes that his two daughters, who otherwise tried to sort of deceive him into believing that they were very loving and respectful towards him, are in fact very ungrateful. And this old man, who is 80 years old, he cannot endure it. And he's about to crack up. And then he says, pointing to his daughter, Regan, he says, she has tied sharp-toothed ingratitude like a vulture. Here, he says, here. The vulture of ingratitude is eating his vitals, he says. And then he goes on to say, oh, will someone not anatomize Regan and find out what stuff she's made of, right? That's the agony of a father. My dear friends, it's not easy to be parents in this world. I will not go into it. It's a whole theme in itself. But please be advised and remember that the heartbreak and the agony that lurks in parenthood is because of this no room principle. No room principle. There is no room for the elderly in the modern way of life. No room. That's a problem. Okay? And as I said, it's got many facets. Ingratitude. Ingratitude is a function of no room in the inn. You understand? So move on. The next aspect of this, did Jesus find faithfulness in this world? Fidelity, faithfulness? How many people are faithful to him? Who are faithful to him? Who betrayed him? One of his disciples, right? The treasurer, the keeper of the money bag. He had to betray Jesus with a kiss. Malcolm Muggeridge, the famous British journalist who actually introduced Mother Teresa to the Western world, has a beautiful book called Jesus of Nazareth, I think. There he says that of all the disciples of Jesus Christ, only Judas Iscariot was an aristocrat. And what's the evidence he adduces to prove his point? He says, look at the way he betrays Jesus. He says, that is how aristocrats betray somebody, with a kiss. He says, then he says this, and I'm quoting from memory. He says, if Peter were to deny, or if Peter were to betray Jesus, he would have pointed out Jesus from a distance and fled in shame. Instead, this aristocrat, quasi-aristocrat of those days, which is no aristocracy in our times, this aristocrat comes, up front, kisses Jesus and betrays him. But the issue is very simple, my dear friends. You should be exceptionally lucky if you come across fidelity in this world. Don't have romantic expectations. Do not add to your heartbreak. I'm not urging you to be cynical. I'm asking you to be realistic. And if you're realistic, you and I will first ask a question. Am I capable of faithfulness? It's a very difficult question to answer, right? Am I capable of faithfulness, of fidelity? Think of the workplace, for example. How many people are faithful to the workplace? I remember somebody getting a permanent job, a letter of confirmation in his job. And he says, in Hindi, he says, ab chutti mil gaya. I've got permanent holiday. I don't have to work. I'm made permanent. Therefore, I don't have to work, right? Who is faithful to Jesus Christ in the entire panoply, the whole panorama of Christianity today? Who can claim that, one of the 19th century philosophers, is a philosopher of history, and perhaps a foremost writer on the positive philosophy, French philosophy of positivism. You can look that up in Wikipedia if you like. His name is Auguste Comte, Auguste Comte, pronounced Comte. Now, he said, he writes, he's an ardent Catholic. He's an ardent Catholic. In spite of that, he says that in the historical development of Catholicism, and therefore he says, it is incorrect to call the Roman Catholic Church the church. He says, do not call it the Roman Catholic Church. And he always uses the expression, the Roman Catholic system. He doesn't use the word church. It's very interesting. He's a Roman Catholic. He's a Roman Catholic apologist. But he doesn't use the expression Roman Catholic Church, RCC. He uses the expression RCS, Roman Catholic system. Why? Because he says the church, in order to develop historically, had to discard Jesus because Jesus was too naive. And no system can be erected on the ideals of Jesus. Okay? It's very interesting to look him up. Auguste Comte, Auguste, Auguste Comte, Comte. So that's as far as fidelity is concerned. Judas had to betray Jesus. Why? Because there was no room for Jesus in his scheme of things. All kinds of weird interpretations have been offered for Judas. Some trying to exonerate him, some trying to romanticize him, some trying to damn him. No, nothing of the sort is required, my friends. I offer you a very simple interpretation. Judas had to betray Jesus because in his scheme of things, there is no room for him. And you see the tension developing between Judas and Jesus all the way through. You think of that context, I think the 12th chapter of John's Gospel, where a woman comes and anoints the feet of Jesus with expensive oil, the oil of spikenard. And Judas is resentful. He says this should have been sold and the proceedings should have been given to the poor. Not that he cared for the poor, as the text says, but because he loved money. So the love of money and the love of Christ cannot go together. You will sell Jesus. And if you remember the introductory lecture I gave about 7 months ago, I said that all religions thrive on one principle, and that is God is a sellable commodity. You remember that lecture? God is a sellable. No religion will exist if God is not sellable. The rest is all hypocrisy. The only fact, as far as religions are concerned, is this, that God is sellable. If God is not sellable, all religions will disappear. Believe you me. So, money principle is a shrinking principle. Money principle is a shrinking principle. Money causes everyone to shrink. If money gets into your mind, if money gets into your heart, rest assured they will shrink. Your kidneys will shrink, if you don't mind. Nothing will remain the same. That's the story of the rich young man. He was not free to accept his own liberation. Why? Because of money. The text says that. I'm not saying this. He went away sorrowful because he had much wealth. And he could not think of a foundation for his life except the security offered by worldly wealth. So wherever money reigns, now note it down, wherever money reigns, there will be neither gratitude nor fidelity. You know, there is a minor English novelist called Paul Scott. Paul Scott. In one of his novels, I forget the title of the novel, I remember reading like this. He says, only the poor of the world are fortunate in love, because only they will be loved for who they are and not for what they have. Paul Scott, a British novelist. He's not popular in India. I don't think anyone reads him today. Only the poor stands any chance whatsoever of being loved for who they are and not for what they have. And in other words, Paul Scott is saying that only the poor is actually loved as human beings. Now, therefore, the money principle is a shrinking principle, and it abolishes the room for gratitude, for fidelity, for ideals, and for freedom. It is a death principle. So, finally, the one thing that Jesus did not find is justice. Okay? As I mentioned, three things that Jesus did not find as corollary to the notice that was put up, which is no room in the inn. First, I said there's no gratitude. Secondly, I said there is no fidelity. Third principle, there is no justice. All this is found in the Christmas event. That's why I'm mentioning this. It's up to you to connect. So the justice principle. Now, for a moment, think of this. Just two references I'll give you. Matthew chapter 11, verses 1 to 5. You know, John the Baptist sends two of his disciples to Jesus with a question. Are you the one we have been waiting for, or should we look for somebody else? And Jesus answers in a very interesting fashion. He says, go and tell John that the blind see, the deaf hear, the dumb speak, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the dead are raised. Then he says something that nobody else will say. He says, having said all this, he says, blessed are those who are not offended at him. You tell me, what is there so offensive about opening the eyes of the blind, healing the leper, etc.? Is there anything offensive? That's the point. That's the point. Jesus did not find justice in the world. At the hands of, not only at the hands of Caiaphas, the high priest, of Pontius Pilate, the Roman procurator, Jesus did not find justice at the hands of the very same people who benefited from his public ministry. None of them. Open your eyes. This is the insignia. This is the hallmark of the world. You will not find justice. We must realize this, not to become cynical. All right, now I want to come to the heart of the matter. Why have I mentioned these things? To me, Christmas is a divine mandate in the light of what I've said so far, a divine mandate for 4 things. 1, make room for others. 2, try to practice the spirituality of gratitude. Try to practice the spirituality of gratitude. 3, try to cultivate the discipline of fidelity. 4, be committed to justice for the other. Everyone clamors for justice for oneself. But the real test and proof of your commitment to justice is that you clamor for justice for the other. This is the reason, friends, why I have taken, and I had to take a stand on, say, for example, what the bishop in Bala said.
माँ, मैं 5 मिनट
Just to
में
take
फोन
one
करता हूँ।
example. A
मैं फोन करता
Christian
हूँ 5 मिनट
must
में।
be distinguished by his proactive commitment to justice. Let me give an illustration from the Old Testament. King David. Now, what was the beautiful thing about King David? We know the disastrous moral lapse he had, all the rest of it. But there is one event in his life that I remember with particular excitement, and that is when he became the king, he sent out messengers to all parts of the kingdom with a mandate. What was the mandate? He says, go and find out if there are surviving members of the Saul family, the former king, King Saul. And then he says, in order that I may practice God's justice. Who was Saul? Saul was someone who tried several times to kill him. Okay, but the first thing he does is he sends out messengers to find out if there are any members of the Saul family that David may do God's justice with them. That is the idea. And now think of the 6th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, verse 33. Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God and his justice, and all these things shall be added unto you. My dear friends, simple logic. What is the need for seeking justice? Why do you have to seek justice? If justice is easily found and easily done, do you have to seek justice? The idea of having to seek justice exists on a clear conviction that justice is the exception, not the rule. And the hallmark of a disciple of Jesus must be his passionate commitment to doing justice where injustice prevails. And that is why Jesus gives the doctrine of the other cheek. If someone slaps you on one cheek, show the other. If someone forces you to walk with him 1 mile, walk with him 2. That's what's called proactive justice. So Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, unless your sense of justice exceeds the justice of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of God. But that's the exalted level of justice that we are to practice. Now, if we talk about these things today, we will actually be branded as anti-church, rebels, and radicals. If you insist that we must exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees in our relationship with the world around us, we will be ridiculed. That's where we have reached today. But still, we will celebrate the Christmas event. My submission is very simple, my friends. Either we renounce the Christmas event or accept the meaning of it. You can't do both. You can't celebrate Christmas and deny the meaning of it. That's the ultimate hypocrisy that we can commit. We can do much better without this hypocrisy. Give it up altogether so that your conscience is clear. You can do whatever the world wants. Or if you pay any heed to the Christmas event, make an effort to understand the meaning of it and honor it. It's not easy. I don't want to make it sound very simple. No, it's not easy. I agree with Soren Kierkegaard that the most difficult thing in the world is to be a Christian, to be following the principles and ideals that Jesus Christ has prescribed for his disciples. But he says, what is the alternative? Is there any alternative? So either give up Christmas, either give up Christianity, or honor its meaning, honor its spirit. And I tell you, the day Christians begin to, even in a tentative manner, begin to honor Christmas in its true meaning, the world will change. The world will change. So this is a very simple reading, as simple as I can make it, of the meaning of the Christmas event. I've taken about 55 minutes. There's of course much more to be said, but I request all of you to pursue these lines of thought. In fact, you'll come across many more. As I said, I've only selected a few out of them. Very many aspects of it that I've left out. Please continue this reflective, meditative pilgrimage after the meaning, to begin with, of Christmas, and thereafter of the faith that Jesus inaugurated, and see how it can actually be mediated to the world around us, so that, as Jesus says, we become the light of the world. Thank you very much, and now we can have our time of discussion. I want to thank once again all those who have joined us today. I don't know how many of us are there. Yeah, 27. I noticed we are 27 today. Thank you. So time for discussions, questions, interactions, objections. If I have not been clear in anything, please let me know. I can offer whatever clarifications I possibly can. Yes, George.
Thank you very much, Valson. It is I consider you gave me an opportunity to introduce myself.
Yeah.
You know me, I know you, and I don't know anyone else. And I'm very fortunate to be here. And thank you for your invitation to be here. Valson will tell you, my name is George John. I'm a psychiatrist. Well, I used to be one. My wife and I lived the majority of our adult life in London, and now in our old age, we've come to live in the tropical warmth of Kochi. It is really very wonderful. To hear you talk. I've never heard your lectures before. There are professors and professors, and many I know are they help their students get their degrees, higher education, PhDs, and do research. But the kind of wisdom that you have imparted is a mind-blowing variety. Thank you. I don't want to ask, there are you said this was about the hidden dimensions of Christmas. And you said some very important things, I think, about firstly, gratitude. As a psychiatrist, I say one of the cures for depression and anxiety is to feel grateful.
Absolutely. Yes.
That is, and some of the talking cures for certain types of mental illness is to help people develop and understand this sort of thing through various talking treatments called psychotherapies, and mindfulness is a very important one. Anyway, I think a serious intellectual search for the true meaning of Christmas probably started at the age of enlightenment in the 17th century Europe. But it gathered momentum, I think, around the 19th centuries. You said, to me, basic meaning of Christmas is love, peace on earth and goodwill to all men.
Right.
But if the story of the birth of Jesus in a lowly cattle shed, probably in a dark and dingy cave in Bethlehem. Oh, by the way, in ancient Hebrew, Bethlehem actually means the house of bread. Am I right?
Yeah, it is.
And if that story is correct, why doesn't the Christic principles that story implies, why doesn't it lie at the heart of Christianity today?
Yeah. Well, I would leave that question with the group in general, but only say this for the time being, that this is not the only thing that's been edited out of the panorama of Christianity. Various things have gone out. You know, Tolstoy writes at length about it. Dostoevsky writes obliquely about it. Various philosophers of history in general who have studied Christianity have mentioned, you know, people like, not so much Saint Augustine as people like, say, Kant, I mentioned, to some extent, surprisingly, Karl Marx, Hegel, Pascal, Blaise Pascal, in the French context, and so on and so forth. So many of them have lamented over this or regretted this, but going by Auguste Comte, one could perhaps say that people in various stages in the evolution of Christianity felt that a compromise with the dynamics of the world is necessary for Christianity to spread. Now, interestingly, who was it? I forget his name. Someone, that name just escapes my mind. He says, interestingly, that God had to use falsehood. God had, that's Joachim, who said this. God had to use falsehood in the early phase of humanity to eventually lead people into truth. It's a very interesting line of thought, right? And later on, of course, Schopenhauer, 19th century, he says that, you know, hypocrisy is perhaps very essential for the survival of religion. So there is this line of thought that if you become too idealistic, you become impractical, and that takes a toll on Christianity. Therefore, if Christianity is to survive, it has to survive in compromise with and in conformity to worldly principles. This is actually the dominant line of now Thomist philosophy, for example, St. Thomas Aquinas, who argued for the political presence of the spiritual, that the spiritual cannot be disembodied and stay at a distance from the affairs of the world, and therefore spirituality must have a political dimension. That is the Thomist philosophy, which influenced the Roman Catholic worldview to a large extent. In fact, much more than St. Augustine, it was St. Thomas Aquinas who influenced the formation, the Summa Theologica, influenced the formation of Catholic theological world. Anyway, so there is no really precise, I mean, one can advance a host of reasons and various situations where things happen. But the overall bird's eye view with which I have to conclude this part of the discussion is that it is the approach of pragmatism, well-meaning pragmatism, I must say, that made many radical spiritual teachings of Jesus Christ and the ideals of Jesus Christ to be discarded from the texture, the religious texture of Christianity. And even today, I mean, I remember in 1984, I was the main resource person for a series of programs organized by the Church of North India. It was called a Leadership Development Program, Church of North India. And my task was mainly to enlighten heads of institutions. I mean, Church of North India has about 1,000 schools and about 10 colleges, etc. So I conducted programs for all of them. And when I talked about the ideals of Jesus Christ, the doctrines and the teachings of Jesus Christ, all those heads of institutions would listen to me with some respect. But at the time of the discussions, almost everyone would say, well, all this is very fine, but they don't work on the ground. They can't be practiced. We cannot run an institution according to these principles. That opened my eyes. So when I became principal of St. Stephen's College, the one question that was uppermost in my mind was, can I run St. Stephen's College according to these principles? The answer to that question is in my book. It can be got from Amazon.in. Let me use this opportunity to promote my book, right?
I'm ordered it here.
Okay. Any other questions? Further? You can also comment on George has raised. I mean, I'm not the founding head of all this.
Sir, actually, what you know about from the scriptures, what you know about the life of the Mother Mary after the crucifixion of the Jesus Christ? I'm not having any idea.
I'm afraid I'm rather illiterate. I'm rather illiterate on this issue. But I would think that she was just an ordinary woman.
Okay.
I say the reason why I say this. When I look at scriptures, particularly books based on scriptures and books dealing with the life of important people, saints, etc., I find a lot of untruth and insincerity. And that insincerity stems from a superstition, a false assumption that only a person who was extraordinarily strange from the birth onwards can do meaningful work or godly work. I don't subscribe to that notion at all. I can believe that anyone can be an instrument in the hand of God, provided even very ordinary people, most unpromising people, can be instruments in the hand of God, provided they are willing to hand themselves over to the purposes of God. Jesus did not call the educated, the elite class. He called the bottom most rung of the society, the fisher folk, right? And what was their eligibility? What was their merit? Only one thing: they were willing to respond to the call of Jesus. So Simon and his brother Andrew would sit mending their net at the seashore of Galilee. Jesus would come that way and say, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. They will leave everything and go. That's the only eligibility requirement. You don't have to be outstanding people. I believe that God prefers very ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary purposes. So therefore, the idea that Mary had to be someone extremely special and from birth onwards, she had some aura, some nimbus around her neck and this, I really don't believe in it. I find it very, very insincere. At any rate, there is absolutely no biblical basis for this. These are concoctions. If they are bandied back and forth, they have no value. They certainly have no historical merit. Okay? I'm sorry for being very, very blunt about it.
Yes, Reverend Thampu, I would like to ask you a question. I'm George John from America.
George, of course I know you. By the way, George is a very leading educator in Kerala. He's a very successful, runs a very successful educational enterprise. Well, I will not reveal more of the secrets because he could get into trouble with income tax. Okay.
Right.
Yes, George. Yes, George. Yeah.
Right. Okay, sir. So, from whatever you have written, what I read, I realized that, you differentiate between spirituality and religion.
Yes, I do.
And I am 67 now. I believe that religion is a great solace. And spirituality doesn't exist alone. Only when there are rituals, there are religion. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, religions might have killed a huge number of people. Agreed. But what's the solution? Spirituality alone, maybe it will exist only among the elite. Okay.
Yeah.
So religion, I think we have to cleanse it. We have to ensure that it is washed properly or it is cleared properly. Then
Yeah.
it will be a good thing rather than expecting spirituality to exist alone.
Yeah.
So what do you think, sir?
Oh, okay. Normally I don't disagree with John, but today I have to slightly, not also, just a little bit of disagreement. John, spirituality is not found among the elite. If at all it is found among very ordinary people.
Okay.
Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, you say, what is the way out? My only answer is that the way out is Jesus Christ, and he is the way. If you read the 4 Gospels, you'll realize that Jesus had a very different idea of man's spiritual thirst or man's needs, other than physical needs, or what we call metaphysical needs, from what we have today. For example, is there any evidence in the 4 Gospels that Jesus deemed a hierarchy to be essential? On the other hand, I can give you n number of evidence to prove that Jesus disapproved of the religious hierarchy. Did Jesus ever suggest, even accidentally, that mediation by a third party is necessary to maintain the right relationship with God? No, on the other hand, Jesus said that is completely unnecessary and it is undesirable. When Jesus said to people, your faith, see, people come to him with needs, right? So he says, your faith has made you whole. What does it mean? It means that it suffices that you have faith. And faith is what? Faith is your personal relationship with God. Your faith can never be mediated by a religious establishment. In fact, the moment a third party comes into your faith, that faith collapses and gets corrupted. Okay. Now, rituals. Can you point out a single Judaic ritual that Jesus practiced? Just one. Well, you will say, well, didn't Jesus undergo baptism? We had I took about 4 sessions on the baptism of Jesus, all trying to establish that the baptism of Jesus was radically different from the ritual that was being practiced in those days. Jesus's baptism was a public commitment to pursuing and realizing the righteousness of God upon us. And our baptism has nothing to do with it. So it is actually not a ritual in the usual sense of the term. It's a public commitment. Now, the other ritual which we celebrate, which is the Lord's Supper, if you read the 13th chapter of John's Gospel, you read, and of course, if you read my book titled Thoughts for Trying Times, there's a full chapter on this. You will find that what is celebrated today as Lord's Supper or Eucharist or the Mass or Qurbana has really nothing to do with what Jesus did at that time. In fact, what we do today is a complete rejection of the meaning that Jesus had in mind in organizing this great experience. Okay. Well, it will take me a lot of time to go into detail. So since I've written about it, I will not go through that one whole chapter deals with it in detail. Okay. So, but now there is a point that George John is making, which I must respect, and that is, there is a value to be attached, a practical value to be attached to religion as a vehicle. For example, if you want to drink water, you cannot drink water from the air. Water does not remain suspended in the air. You need to drink water from a glass or a cup or a mug or whatever. Okay. So religion can be that water, that receptacle, that container, mug or glass or cup or whatever, which holds the water of spirituality. But religion cannot satisfy your thirst. Your thirst has to be satisfied by the living waters. Now, religion remains in a state of health and therefore in relevance to the human predicament, so long as it contains that living water that Jesus is. And if and when religion reaches a state that the church at Laodicea did, and I refer to that, Revelation chapter 3:20, when Jesus is out and everything else is in, then it is no longer a receptacle or a container that carries the spiritual thirst assuaging living waters. It's only an empty shell. As I wrote in one of my books titled Rediscovering Mission Towards a Non-Western Missiological Paradigm, I make a distinction between church as a monument and church as a movement. And I argue in that book that whatever God created is a movement. Whatever man creates becomes a monument. That's why the history is dotted with monuments. And all movements degenerate in the hands of men into monuments. Like Gandhi. Gandhi was a movement, he has become a monument. Christianity was a movement. Jesus was a movement. He has been turned into a monument. And when it becomes a monument, what happens is the receptacle, the cup, becomes everything. There is no water. The cup says, we don't need water. Okay, I can quench everybody's thirst. Let everybody come to me, the cup. And it is up to you to acquire the art of quenching your thirst with my cup without water. That's what is called religious fidelity. Okay. Now we are still going through the COVID pandemic phase, right? It's a good experience for all of us. Ask yourself, to which aspect of the human predicament is Christianity as it is organized today relevant? George, you say that in your age, in your old age, or you're not old age, you're middle age, 67 is not old in today's reckoning, you need solace. If you are finding solace, make a distinction between church and what Jesus Christ offers. If you're finding solace in church life, I would say, let's shout 3 hoorays to it. I'm excited about it. But what we found in the last 2 years is a completely different picture. It was a brutal unmasking of the utter irrelevance of everything. And that is the reality that I'm trying to address. And actually, it was that reality that made me, apart from other things, write this book, Beyond Religion. Okay. So anyway, thanks for the question. See, only when such provocative questions are asked, will I be able to really make things a little clearer. So feel free to ask anything. If I can't, I don't have an answer, I will very humbly tell you and excuse myself. But let's be clear. Let's be bold enough to know what is what.
So you said,
yes, Francis.
You said Christmas is a spiritual cyclone. Is it because in your book, in Thoughts for Trying Times, in Bethlehem Principle, you just juxtapose Bethlehem and Babel.
Yes.
The construction of Babel versus the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem.
Yes.
Is it that the message of Christmas is to, make room for others? Just now you said, try to practice spirituality, try to be grateful, to have gratitude, and also to practice fidelity, and also to do justice, proactive justice, wherever there is injustice. These are all basic Christian principles, no? So is it that, like you said, Soren, you quoted Soren Kierkegaard saying that the most difficult thing is to practice, to be a true Christian, to be a practicing Christian.
Yes.
Is it that all this will lead us into a moral cyclonic situation?
Yes.
If we try to practice all this in the practical world, it
Yes.
will be a kind of a cyclonic situation morally for us.
Yes.
Does
Yes.
we're meaning that? when you said Christianity is a spiritual cyclone. That's what you said, no?
Oh, well,
Xmas,
sometimes,
spiritual cyclone.
Francis, sometimes, because of my perversity as a public speaker, I use exaggerations. It's one of the rhetorical devices in use from classical times that you shock people into awareness. Because see, what happens is, again, it's part of cognitive psychology. When is it that somebody becomes aware? Human consciousness wakes up only when you hit against something.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so in public speaking, you have to sometimes cast a stone. But it should not be false ideas. It must be a verbal exaggeration or a kind of odd, strange way of couching an idea in order to alert, in order to shake up, in order to abolish sleep, to keep sleep at bay. Okay? Now, at the same time, yes, I mean what I said. There's a cyclonic effect. For example, if you were to put yourself in the place of Mary, you're facing a cyclone. If you put yourself in the shoes of Joseph, you're facing a cyclone. Right? Now, if you're putting yourself even in the shoes of Herod, you're facing a cyclone. Because he's rattled.
Yeah.
In fact, the text very clearly says that fear overcame him. Okay, so now when I say that the cyclonic dimension exists, what I'm saying is, what I was trying to do was to alert us to the fact this kind of carnival kind of picture that we have for decades entertained actually shuts our eyes to the heart of the matter. Now, I'm not saying, therefore, that we should not celebrate, there should be no festivity, there should not be any celebration. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that rather than seeing the festivity and the deeper meaning as incompatible, a mature approach is to integrate the two, so that even our celebration becomes sober. In Kerala, maximum liquor is consumed at this time. I mean, you know these things better than I do, so I don't want to export coal to Newcastle. Globally, more people die on Christmas and New Year Eve than during any other time.
That's why George Bernard Shaw said, no, Christmas
Yes.
is a conspiracy between the brewer and the butcher.
That's right.
Bernard Shaw said that.
Yeah. In England, more baby caught deaths are reported during this time because parents leave their newborn babies and go and dance for festivity, right? So life is lost in the process. Now, therefore, we have to somewhere strike a balance. And mind you, when you celebrate, you have to be aware of the fact that your celebration is also your witness to the world. Through how you celebrate, you're bearing witness to something. I have asked myself this question. If a friend of ours from any other faith participates in a Christmas function at home or in the church, what impression will that person carry? What idea of the biblical faith would that person acquire? What impression? Wouldn't it deepen the prejudice that Christianity is a Western religion, which is historical nonsense? It's an Asiatic religion. Yeah. Everything about the way we celebrate things denies the roots of Christianity, presents a false image for whatever reasons. So my point, therefore, is, Francis, very simple. There must be truth in the way we celebrate. Okay? And if for truth to come, proper understanding is essential. How can we be truthful to Christmas if we don't understand the meaning of Christmas? Even if we don't understand the total meaning of Christmas, at least some nuances of those meanings, some subtext of that meaning can be acquired by us. An attempt must be made. That's all my humble submission is. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Any question?
So for want of time,
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
have a very brief question that again religion and spirituality. I find a lot of good things in religion, because when a natural calamity or a pandemic comes like COVID, then as groups we can do a lot of things
Yes.
as a
But-
group, not as individual. And when you talk about spirituality, actually I am convinced, because I am confused, because there is only one Bible, one Jesus Christ, thousands of versions. If you take one of the places called Kumbanad or something like that, there are
Yes.
every house is a different church. So spirituality is too complex for us to comprehend. So therefore, following your path is very difficult. That's all.
Right. Yeah. Hey, George, maybe a slight twist in the statement. I find spirituality very easy to understand.
Mhm.
Religion most difficult to understand. But I find spirituality most difficult to practice and religion most easy to practice. That's my experience. The easiest thing in the world is to practice religion. And the most difficult thing in the world is to practice spirituality. That is why people prefer religion to spirituality.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So, George, I'm not saying that the two must be incompatible. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I fully accept the fact that the two can be one. For example, in the early phase of the development of a religion, spirituality and religion were one.
Yeah.
It's only when a community develops and the material assets are accumulated and the priestly class comes up, that the parting of ways takes place between religion and spirituality. Thereafter, it goes on a different trajectory. And I've dealt with it in detail in Beyond Religion, the new book.
Okay, sir.
Also, may I make a comment?
Yes, Zach, I was waiting for your voice.
In your book, Beyond Religion,
Yes.
you project a movement from religiosity to spirituality, and then to a very interesting word, social spirituality.
Yes. Yes.
And this social spirituality is what you are talking today, about finding room for others in our heart.
Yes.
And considering others as a gift from God.
Yes.
Is that right?
That is right. Though, of course, in that book, in the chapter on social spirituality, I give a wider ambit to social spirituality. So in part, social spirituality is this, but there is much more to social spirituality. By the way, Zach and Jose are the two people who have ordered Beyond Religion. They have started reading it. Zach has made good progress, and Jose Tharagan has just managed to get it. We can discuss the chapters. I mean, I've advanced some very radical ideas in that book. And I felt urged to do so in the present context, given the way our country is shaping. So it should lend itself to very interesting discussions if all of you cooperate by reading and raising questions. We can have wonderful times of discussion, which will be of educational interest to me, if not to others. I learned from these experiences.
Thank you.
Any further question?
Anyway, I have ordered for the book. Let it come. Then only we can understand you in a realistic way.
I know. John, you have to order 10 copies, keep one with you, and give away 9 to your friends.
Right.
Christmas gift.
Right.
Christmas gift.
Okay.
Right.
Agreed. Taken seriously. Right.
Thank you. Ilma, you want to say something? I'm sure my friends will be very happy to hear your voice.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, carry on.
Yes, sir. So I'm inviting you to Himachal Pradesh. You're very welcome to visit us. This district is your own, Una. I'll be
I know
very
that.
happy to, I'll be very happy to make arrangements. Please come visit us. The entire district is all yours. Kangra, any place you want to visit in Himachal Pradesh. The people of Himachal are lovely, simple
Yeah.
people, humble. And in the meanwhile, while you were giving this talk, I attended a couple of phone calls. I'm trying to get a Christmas tree, some
Oh,
decorations in my official
yeah.
residence, and there's a little plan to decorate the thanas as well.
That's what. Yes, I know. I know what all things you do. Will. I'm very proud of you. I must tell you that I had a white Christmas. Probably it was 1974 or 1975, when suddenly I decided to come over to Simla. And that was on the 24th, reached there sometime in the night, and it was snowing. It was such a wonderful experience. And I stayed for 3 days there. It was good. So I know Himachal can be good, and thank you for your kind invitation. But for me, the greatest thing is that we stay connected. Okay, and even more than that, the fact that you try to bring your Stephanian education and your values into your official life.
Absolutely.
And I want you to know,
Absolutely.
yeah, it is greatly appreciated, and I'm proud of you for that reason. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. Yes, George. George Gomes.
No, I just want, is that me?
No, George Gomez. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Ah.
I have a question,
Yes. Yes.
rather like a statement.
Please.
As we discuss about the Christmas, the birth of Christ, as we know, the angels proclaim joy to the world. He is born for the entire humanity.
Yes.
Though he was born in the Jewish sector in the world,
Yeah.
but he was born for all people in the world.
Yeah.
But when he faced death, and just before the night, when
Yes.
he had the Last Supper,
Hmm.
he took up the cup and said,
Yeah.
"This is the blood shed for many."
Hmm.
So when the birth occurred, it was for
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And as I understand, the birth
Hmm.
was for everyone.
Absolutely.
He welcomed everyone
Absolutely.
without any discretion,
Yeah.
anything in this world. He was. But
Yes.
when he was about to go to the cross,
Yeah.
he said, "This is for many. This
Yeah.
blood is shed for many."
Yes.
And we can see further after resurrection.
Hmm.
After resurrection, we can see
Hmm.
that called are many, but chosen are few.
Hmm.
I was thinking, as you said, sir, about shrinking of the world, shrinking of the numerical majority, shrinkage in so many factors.
Yes.
So how this spirituality as proceeds towards the end of the God's plan, the number of people is getting shrunk. And we reach there as called are many, but chosen are few, very few.
Yes.
What is your point on that? And on behalf of, I'm sorry, because another factor which I would like to bring to your kind of attention, that the confusion 90% or 95% of the people in the world has is religion and spirituality. They think both are one, or religion is the spirituality is being inclusive in the religiousness.
Yes, yes.
In my experience, in my knowledge, I think it is standing outside the religion. It is standing outside the religion. And one thing I would like to say that when Yeshua stood to read from the book, as usual in the Sabbath day.
That's right.
When he started reading from the book of Isaiah, he said, this has fulfilled today.
Yeah.
So they didn't like it. They expelled him. They expelled Yeshua out of the synagogue.
Yes, yes.
Even today, as Saint John has written, as he was shown by Yeshua, the days which are coming, that is, we are living in the apocalyptical day.
Yes.
The days are, the end days are here. We are in experience of that. We are experiencing it. But people want, the religious people want those prophecies to be prophecies forever. They don't want that come into existence. They don't want that to be, in our lives fulfilled. They want to keep that prophecies as prophecies itself. The revelation must be kept as revelation till the end. They are not running along with the will of God. As it has to happen, and it is happening today, but we are not ready to acknowledge. We are not prepared for that. Or our religions are prepared enough, because this is not a Christian event. It is a universal event. So Christians are even not prepared to face that, not prepared to accept that and acknowledge it. So I would like to have your point, sir. Thank you.
George, you have raised an assortment of issues. Being an old man, I can't remember all of that, but let me try and address some of the things. You see, the distinction between religion and spirituality is something that I have addressed in great detail in the presently published book, Beyond Religion. There is a chapter titled From Religion to Spirituality. Then, as Dr. Zach just said, there is a chapter titled Social Spirituality. Then there is a chapter called Religion and Reason, so on and so forth. I mean, the whole thing. And then there are 2 chapters on spiritual values. 2 full chapters on spiritual values. I'm explaining everything in detail, right? So I can't possibly bring all of that into our discussion in this kind of a forum. So it's meant to be read and understood. Now, the problem in the dynamics of religious community formation is what I introduced first in the first instance as the problem of shrinking, in the sense that the moment a religious community is formed, 2 things happen. One, it is distinguished and therefore cut off from all others. Okay. Second thing is, the members who constitute that community are homogenized. Everything about the religion or that particular branch of religion or denomination of religion is about homogenization. And because of the homogenization process, a negative psychology comes into existence by which we are obliged to be negative towards those who are outside our fold. And we begin to be told absolute lies about them, that they're all rotten people, they're all going to hell, they are this, they're that, and we are all going to heaven. This is nothing but a bunch of lies, but we are obliged to swallow it. You understand the point I'm making? So the moment a community is formed, hostility to those outside, one. Secondly, allergy to individuality within. That's called homogenization. You cannot maintain your personal identity, your personal conviction, but then it becomes heresy. Heresy is a neutral word, actually. In Latin, heresy simply means I choose. You cannot choose. You will be told what to believe. You will be told what this scriptural text means. If the interpretation of Christmas that I have given to you today is shared with a group of priests and bishops, they'll all be very upset. I can guarantee you that. They're very upset. But they will not tell me where I'm wrong. But they'll all be upset. Okay. So that's the second part. Now, the third part of it is, and I said this, let me recapitulate. I said the spirituality is an outward going movement. For example, Jesus called his disciples to send them out. Okay. Mark chapter 3, verse 14. He called them that they may be with him and that he may send them out. And then Mark says that he sent them out 2 by 2. Chapter 3, verse 14. Now go to Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1, verse 5, where the disciples are given this instruction. They are asked to wait and not to launch out. They said, you shall wait upon me, and you shall, when you wait upon me, you shall receive power. That's the coming of the Holy Spirit, which happens in the 2nd chapter of Acts of the Apostles. And when you have received that power, you will be my witnesses. And now look at the next part. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and unto the end of the world. See, it's like an outward expanding ripple of responsibility. This is what I meant. So the Old Testament ripple is not a ripple. It's a kind of spiral that winds inwards and comes to a dead end. The New Testament spiritual force is an outward moving thing. It embraces the whole world. That's the kingdom of God. Okay. And that is a spiritual thing. Freedom, human freedom is real only within this world embracing vision of life. The moment you are in a homogenized structure, you lose your freedom 100%. Of course, the only freedom left is the freedom to conform. But in the letter to Romans, chapter 12, verse 2, we are explicitly told, do not conform to the pattern of the world, but rather be transformed, that you may know that excellent and indispensable will of God the Father for you. And yet, conformity is all that is required of you today. This kind of absolute mishmash is killing us. It is robbing us of all relevance, all spiritual power, all personal fulfillment. You look in vain today to find a Christian of some substance and stature. Throughout the world. Surely, my friends, there must be some reason for this global dwindling of the stature of Christians. There must be some explanation for it. What is that explanation? I don't want to say anything. You find out and let me know. A global phenomenon cannot exist without a reason. If something happens in a small corner or 10 corners, I can understand. If something global exists, there must surely be a reason for it. Okay. So I don't know if I've answered all of your questions, but some of the things that sort of hit my mind. Anything else? If not, we can wind up. Any further question? Okay, well, that's it. And all that remains to be done is for me to thank all of you for enduring with me so far late into the night. Of course, it's not late into the night for Zach and those who are from the UK and other places. I must tell you that these things begin to dawn in my mind because of you. I mean, there's no exaggeration, actually. All of these things started flooding my mind only after I decided to do this program with you. So I know from experience that insights are born like babies between two people. A person cannot, sitting in a corner like a spider, weave webs of thought relevant to the life of people. Ideas are born among people through their mutual love, their shared sense of purpose, and their orientation to something good and godly. And I thank God that that's happening in our midst. And I want to thank especially those who have joined us for the first time. And I pray that they may have a very blessed Christmas and a meaningful New Year. And may 2022 prove a memorable experience in your life. Of course, it wouldn't happen magically. Therefore, I also pray that God may give you the sense of purpose, determination, and heroism of the Spirit to take the best out of 2022. Okay? Great, great. Thank you so much.
Hare
And
Krishna,
God bless.
brother.
Good night.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.